Good morning for our Saturday of scintillating fun with the amazing, fantastic David Clouter. Good morning, David.
Hello, Mr. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Are things going swimmingly well for you today?
They are. I'm wearing my sonar. It's a bit murky and gloomy down here, so hopefully this will guide me up to the surface.
Oh, phenomenal. I love it. So, we were on Fs, the fantastic Fs. Where are we up to with Fs?
We've reached the great debate about fixed versus variable interest.
Okay. So, tell me, what are we going to look at as a strategy on fixed versus variable interest, David?
Well, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it? Because it depends on our view how we think things are going to go moving forward. If we lock in for people who got their mortgages prior to the credit crunch. Well, hey, because they would have been a certain amount, 0.5% or something above base, and as it goes right down, it's fantastic for them, not so good for the lenders, who obviously would want to get them off those products, and so that's absolutely terrific. Having said that, now that we're at sort of pretty much rock bottom, those kind of products are not quite as available anymore. So there is a kind of floor beyond which it won't go down. And I've had conversation with friends who've had that issue recently, where they ring up the lender and say, "Why hasn't it gone down?" And on a recent-ish mortgage, and the lender say, "Oh, read the fine print. There's actually a bottom to this." So that's kind of one side of it. But you know. If we're going up and down to whatever degree of correlation with interest rates in the big wide world out there, we're going to, in a sense, get some pretty low rates. But what comes with that is an element of risk. So there are people who might like to de-risk it for themselves, because I mean I like making 5-year, 10-year plans or whatever, and it's difficult to do that with things going up and down like a yo-yo, albeit down at the moment. It's important, I think, to remember that up until 2004, 5 or whatever, the 40-year mean average for interest rates was 8%. So tell that to the young people of today; they'll never believe you. So there is scope for things to go up. I don't think that'd be very good for governments at the moment, who themselves incurred a lot of debt fixing the credit crunch. So maybe that's not going to happen. But some people might like a little bit of certainty. So you might go for a 5-year fix, but that might come in at 4.5% or something like that. So it's a swings and roundabout kind of thing. You've got advantages to fixing it in terms of the certainty. You've got advantages to the variable rate in terms of you might start off a bit lower at the moment when cash flow at the start of these business things traditionally is always quite tight. So may I propose to you, Andrew, plan C, which is this one. How about we take half of our mortgages as fixed rate and half of them as variable rate, and in that way we've de-risked it to a certain extent, but we've also got our hands on some of those juicy rates. How does that sound?
That sounds really quite smart. I mean, one of the things I would probably also say is, if you're not sure whether to do a fixed or a variable, what you can do is look at some of the long-term interbank swap rates. Because if the long-term rates that the banks are lending to each other on are going up, then fixing might be a good idea now. If the long-term rates are coming down, then I might hedge and do the plan B or C, as David says, and go for the standard variable rate and then fix when the rates have come down. So the banks don't always get it right. And there's lots of different data that you can look at, like the US swap rates, the interbank swap rates, and all of these will give you clues as to what you should do.
Yeah, good stuff, all good stuff. But yeah, forewarned is forearmed, isn't it, really? And the more tools you have in your armory, the better you are equipped to face this.
Absolutely. So what do we do after fixed versus variable interest rates.
This is one you'll probably have to help me with a bit, because I always pass the more difficult ones on to you. But basically, flat rate of VAT, and this might apply, for example, to people running serviced accommodation businesses, where as the turnover goes up, you get very close to that threshold, and suddenly your business is perhaps 20% less profitable, and there'll be certain things that you can claim back, but kind of the gross booking feature will be income will be subject to VAT, and then you've got your booking.com on top of it, so you get to a point where for every £10 coming in gross, you maybe got £6 to play with to cover all the costs and to make your profit. Now there is this flat rate VAT scheme whereby if you think that your income is going to be below a certain amount, and I think it's 200 and something thousand, you can opt to pay a lower rate, and this can be advantageous for businesses where the spend on that you might be able to recover through VAT isn't that high.
Yeah, well, it's designed specifically for small businesses, the flat rate scheme, as you say. And the idea is that basically the marginal rate that you pay is lower, and therefore you reclaim your input tax, but you pay a lower sales tax on it. And it's like a stepping stone before you get up to higher levels. So it does only apply to the smaller businesses. And typically serviced accommodation could benefit from this, as David rightly says.
And time for the next one, I think.
Yeah. So what's coming up next?
We've got the strategy that some people call buy to sell, but that doesn't begin with F. So you and I call it flipping. Flipping marvellous.
It's flipping brilliant. It's flipping good way to make a few pound.
Now, there are many strategies under which we can buy a house and sell it. Sometimes we can buy it and put it on the market again without touching the paintbrush or anything. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, what was that program with that lady, something about snakes and ladders? It doesn't have to be, well, you go in to refurbish it and spend 3 years perspiring and this kind of thing. Sometimes if you buy correctly, and actually in property in general, it is said, and I believe this, that you make your money when you buy. We need a very good value proposition when we acquire property. So there's no such thing as BMV. I think we covered that on one of our earlier talks, below market value, because the price at which you buy a property defines its value. And I've during flips had some very close shaves in the past, whereby next door comes up, which is kind of pretty much identical, goes for a lower price than all the vowels and numbers that I had in, and that then certainly influences the valuations that I'm going to get when my project ends. Having said that, if we can buy a property which is perhaps in some way distressed, it might be the property that is distressed, it might be the seller that is distressed, it might be a combination of both of these, and we might have some cash, or we might be able to access cash. Maybe we're using a vehicle like bridging, but our ability to close that deal quickly, and maybe also to solve some of the problems that the vendor has, will enable us to pay perhaps a little bit less than if it was marketed for 6 months and an estate agent and offers were coming in and the legal process was sort of taking their time. So, an example could be, for example, a probate sale where there might be one or more inheritees who stand to profit from this sale, and they don't want a drawn-out process. So frankly, they just want everything done and dusted. There might be inheritance tax to pay, in which case there's added pressure on these guys to get a sale. There are other types of properties. There are repossessions. There will probably be now landlords who are seeking perhaps new directions in their property or investment journey, given the current lockdown and the implications of that we're having. But one thing or another, or it may be investors having cash flow problems, there may be divorce which necessitates a sale, and so forth. So we can we can acquire these projects. Let's say we acquire these projects at a way where, when we've done whatever it is we want to do, there's still a little bit of meat in the game for us, if you like. There's still a little bit of money to be made. If we bought an absolutely terrific bargain, there's one guy that I know who goes around. He's bought his probate, for example, and it's really sort of rubbish looking, and then he will go around like a graffiti, like Banksy, with a spray can, and he will mark on the walls places where you might have a window or an extra door. He'll mark on the floors, on the carpets or something. He'll spray these in where the new walls could go, and this kind of thing, and improving the layout. And we saw last time how to make an extra bedroom in a house for 1,500, which would lift the value massively, and this kind of thing. But just him having spent half an hour there with a spray can, he'll then list it at auction, within that context. Traditionally at auctions, you've got people who are looking for bargains, that they're looking for projects, and very often the people who bid the prices up at the auction, although not always, will be the not the professional builder or people like this, but people who've seen TV shows or who've become in some way inspired to do property. So if you can do the thinking for them to a degree, it makes their job easier. So in that sense, we're talking about properties where you don't do anything and just buy them at a very good price and list them on. I know a lot of property sources who actually sell their best stuff through auction, and then the slightly less stuff goes to their list. Some might argue that that's kind of the wrong way around, but then there will be properties where with a minimum amount of work, and you do need to cost these things very, very accurately, but with a minimum amount of work, you'll be able to turn this around for retail sale, to sell it to a family, to an end user, for example, and we're talking principally about things which are maybe cosmetic jobs. Some structural jobs can be quite pricey, so you'd really want to price that into to purchase price if you're going to take on settlement or some of these kind of issues. But there will be these profit margins. It should be mentioned that recent tax changes now mean that you have 30 days to settle the CGT bill, and in fact that even applies if you're selling your home and you've got the old one still available, although there is a grace period which I believe again has been shrunken down to 9 months or thereabout. But you can do this, and it is a way to raise some capital, because the more capital we have, the more potential we have. To have a bit of a capital reserve, and recent events have shown us the importance of having a capital reserve when suddenly out of nowhere, I didn't predict COVID-19, and I'm sure nobody else did either, but I see myself, and I sort of position myself as the go-to expert on cycles and things like this, but sometimes when a comet hits the Serpentine in London, or when there's a virus that breaks out or something like that, there are these unforeseen contingencies, and hence having a bit of cash in the bank is always useful in our game, particularly if there are other people who don't weather the storm quite as well as us, and then there are buying opportunities.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, David. I mean, there's a couple of things you touched on there. The property cycles, that's key, and I know very shortly you're joining us on the Great Property Meet, and you're doing a brand new COVID-19 property cycles and where that fits in to the generational cycles. But also I do a negotiation 101, and what you said at the very, very start was all about buying at the right price. Now, if you know how to negotiate smartly, you can buy at the right price, and you can also use those negotiation skills to sell at the maximum price as well, because negotiations are a two-ended thing, buy and sell. So you can max your margin out there, and it's very smart. So worth following a couple of the other YouTube videos out there. One that will be coming up very shortly from David on the cycles, and another one coming up from myself where I regularly deliver a talk on negotiation 101. So David, phenomenal. I don't think I can add any more to flips. You covered the debt, the death, the divorce, all the reasons why people will want to flip. So What else could we have?
Well, there is one other little thing for flips. It is that some of the less experienced people who don't know about hard runs and who don't have reverb teams available, first fix guys and strip out team and whatever, some of these people, particularly the ones who are featured in television shows, they might do just as well in their property journey during a rising market if they buy it there and then just go to the Caribbean for a year and then come back and sell it there, and they might get the same amount of appreciation as if they'd paid retail for all the stuff, had a builder to manage it on top of that, and he's taken his markup and this kind of thing, and so rising markets can definitely help us when we're doing flips. And the converse thing, which is the important thing, is that our falling market can absolutely nobble us, because however we've done our sums, there's a part of the property cycle, it's just sort of teetering around there, and then it kind of goes there, and then it goes into free fall for just a tiny little bit every 18 years or so. But you don't want to get caught in that bit, otherwise you might have to use your second exit strategy and rent it out for a year or two until those numbers recover for you.
No, couldn't agree more with you, David. I mean, some sound advice there. So, I mean, David's got, about 4 months' worth of experience he's sharing with you here. So, it's well worth heeding that advice. So,
yep. I started when I was 21. Now I'm heading for my 22nd birthday. So, I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the next one is a sort of broad brush type thing, and it's focus on your goals. In the year 2000 or 1999 or something like that, I was very privileged to start a radio station with my very good friend, the late Mr. Tommy Vance, who some of you may remember. We got a lot of money out of a city investor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a substantial 7-figure sum, and as part of this, his right-hand man came in to be our non-executive director. It's always good to have an experienced non-exec who turns up for an hour or two every month, not a month or two every hour. And this guy Tony was a lovely fella who gave us a lot of experience. And I remember to this day the first time we met him, the first board meeting that he came to. There was about 6, 7, 8 of us around this boardroom table, and he came and he sat down and he said, "Right, fellas, hit me with your plans." So we were like kind of school kids with extra Smarties and licorice all sorts and so forth, and we were all bouncing around the table. We're going to do this, 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 and I think that's part of the negotiate, probably part of your negotiation 101 thing, Andrew. That this guy just sat there and listened very patiently and made a few notes. And then he paused when we'd all sort of said all these wonderful things we were going to do. We were going to, take over the world, conquer Mars, and life, the universe, and everything was going to be subjugated by us within a matter of weeks. And he gave us some very good advice, which is possibly the best advice that I've had in business ever. He stood up. I'm not going to do that now because my head will get cropped off the top of the screen. But he stood up and he said, "Fellas, some wonderful ideas." And he kind of stretched out his arms. Again, they've just got truncated as well. And he narrowed them in and he said, "What I would like you to do in order for this business to succeed is focus. Choose 1 or 2 or at most 3 of these ideas, that all of which are wonderful, but focus your attention and your efforts in giving 100% to these couple of things and make them succeed massively." He said, if you do all the things you've described with the size of team that you have, you won't be able to do any of them properly, and the chances are you'll fail. And that certainly more than justified his presence in that board meeting, and he kept on over the years and months and years giving us other kind of sound advice, but that was numero uno for me.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the way you're spinning the decks today, it's brilliant. I mean, it's going swimmingly well for us all. And your head almost went out the fish tank for us today, didn't it?
And not a snorkel in sight.
But no, very seriously speaking there, the advice about focusing on your goals: become a specialist, become good at something, because if you become good at it, you become known as an expert in that field. And the advice he was basically giving David there is, if he went off and did 26 different things, that dilutes David's effort. It dilutes the energy. And by dilution, you therefore get lower returns and you achieve less. So it was absolutely sound advice, David. I think he couldn't have given you any better. I mean, I'm just looking at the time as well, David. We've been going for 20 minutes again.
Whoa.
Which we filled this week's session. So we're going to have to swim ourselves out of here to our island, where we'll join you next time.
And one little thing just before we do go, that guy who gave me that advice, he went on to run a £1 billion government quango, so he knew his stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, from the advice that you've just shared there in that little nugget, he definitely did know his stuff. And it's similar sort of thing that I share with people as well. So, brilliant. David, it's been phenomenal. Let's swim on out of here now, and we'll head off and catch up with you all next week.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, Andrew. Up Periscope and empty the ballast tanks, and off we go.
Absolutely. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.